And to Frank and to everyone here for hosting me and giving me the opportunity to talk about the Japanese Cuban community. So let's go ahead and go into it. So agenda here is I'll be talking about why did the Japanese go to Cuba. The second part is what did my Japanese family do while they lived in Cuba, and then what is the Japanese Cuban community like today. And then at the end, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have. So let's start off. Why did the Japanese go to Cuba? And so there were basically two big forces at play here. So you had a push effect going on where the Japanese were basically there were Japanese that were being kind of pushed out of the island, and on the Cuban side, you had this pull effect. And so let me talk briefly about this push and pull dynamic that basically happened, and this is in the late 1800s. So in Japan, small island nation, resource constrained, they basically had a large poor population. So the Japanese government was trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we either pull these people out of poverty, right? How do we give them opportunities to be successful in life? Now in Cuba, along with a large part of Latin America, late 1800s, the big sugar boom was going on. And so a lot of Latin American countries were looking for cheap labor. So in Japan, a lot of the poor people there were farmers. And so the Japanese government made a number of arrangements with a lot of other Latin American countries, Peru and Chile and Mexico, and then of course, well, I don't know how many people know that Cuba was one of those countries. And so the Japanese government basically helped these Latin American countries market and recruit. In Japan, they had posters saying go, we'll send you to Latin America, and you'll earn a lot more money than you can in Japan. Then send your money back to Japan, and make a better life for yourself and for your families. And so, right, that was a huge attraction for poor farmers in Japan that really didn't have many options available to them. So let's see. Okay, and then right on the pull side, right? So Cuba, they're looking for cheap labor, and Japan was a likely source for that. So to talk a little bit about my family. So my mother's side is Japanese by blood. My grandmother's generation and my mother's generation, all born in Cuba. Spanish is their native language. When I'm at family events for Christmas and whatnot, Spanish is the dominant language in the household. And we eat Cuban food and Cuban songs and Cuban culture. The interesting part about I think the Japanese Cuban families is that it's predominantly Cuban. There's not as much Japanese influence, and so. Let me talk a little bit about some of the points up here, and then I can kind of circle back a little bit. So, what did my family do? So, like a lot of Cuban families, there were a lot of farmers in Cuba. My family in Japan, they came from the Kumamoto district, and they were also farmers there. So when they came to Cuba, farming was a natural kind of fit, and my grandfather and great-grandfather, they were both very entrepreneurial. So they started an ice cream shop and sold ice cream in this town called Sagua La Grande. And a quick side story about Sagua La Grande. So for anyone who knows Senator Mel Martinez, United States Senator from Florida, he was also from Sagua La Grande. I was in DC a few years ago at a GOP fundraiser, and I went up to him because I knew he was born in the same town that my family grew up in. And I actually found out that he went to school with my godfather, who's my mom's cousin. And so there was just this interesting connection in talking to Senator Martinez about his experience in Cuba. Back to the ice cream shop. So I was telling him about my family's ice cream shop, and the second I mentioned it, he knew exactly what it was because it was obviously the only ice cream shop in the city that was run by Japanese people. So yeah, he was telling me that you know, the ice cream shop was you know, really enjoyed by all the locals, and it was, you know, kind of in the center of a park. And you know, I guess I also forgot to mention that I went to Cuba in 2006 as a part of my master's you know, research, and went through the whole, you know, Byzantine OFAC regulations and getting my permit and whatnot. So a lot of and part of this is my own research, but then a part of it is also I'll have some pictures from my trip at the end. But yeah, I actually saw where the family ice cream shop was near the town square, and it was you know, just such a powerful experience, you know, connecting with, you know, where you're, you know, this was, I think, your quintessential, you know, connecting with your roots type story. And I think with Cuba, obviously as Americans, it is really, really difficult to get to Cuba legally, and I was just really, you know, fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to go and to see where my family grew up. So the fourth point here, you know, I don't know how many people realize that, you know, during World War II, everyone here is familiar with the Japanese internment of Japanese Americans here in the United States. However, that also happened in other countries, and so Cuba at the time was a U.S. ally, and the Cuban government, at the behest of the U.S. government, also interned Japanese Cubans in Cuba. My grandfather and my great-grandfather and a whole bunch of the other males in my family were imprisoned in Cuba, and they had these, you know, circular prisons on another separate island off of the coast of Cuba, and that was something that I didn't know before I went on my trip and, you know, started doing my research. But I thought that was a very you know, interesting part of not only just, you know, Cuban history, but also my family history. Sure, question.
Were all their possessions taken away also, or were they treated the same as what happened here in the U.S.?
So yeah, question was, were all my family's possessions taken away? I don't know the details for sure, but I know it was only the men who were interned. So my grandmother and my great-grandmother, they were, you know, and the other women in the family were left to their own devices to, you know, keep running the ice cream shop and some of the other businesses that they had going on. But I don't believe any of their stuff was actually appropriated by the government. But that was during World War II. During the Castro Revolution, that's when all our family stuff was taken. So, you know, the revolution, you know, Fidel Castro came in 1959 and, right, decided to, you know, sweep the island with, you know, with the revolution. And so my family, you know, they had become, you know, I wouldn't say, you know, not wealthy by any means, but, you know, well off, very comfortable, very, you know, just living, you know, very satisfying life. But in came Castro and the revolution, and things just started, you know, going downhill. The ice cream store was, you know, from what my family has told me, that it was taken by the government. You know, a lot of you know, the family, you know, money that they had in the banks were, you know, were also taken. And so the first person in my family to leave Cuba for the United States was my godfather, who is my mom's cousin, who went to school with Senator Martinez. And so in, I think it was 1963, JFK signed, it was called Operation Peter Pan. I don't remember what the law was, but basically Operation Peter Pan was an effort by the United States government to have 15,000 Cuban children come to the United States, and basically it was kind of an escape hatch, right, for these kids. But, you know, it was tough because a lot of the families, the parents, were not permitted to come over, so it was just the children. So my godfather came to the United States in 63, 64, and then the rest of my family came in different waves. It was 66, my mother came, she was 14 years old.